The agenda is the #1 critical tool for effective meetings. Debbie and I firmly believe this. Without an agenda, it's way too easy to wander in the woods, to go down rabbit holes, and to end up in the weeds, never achieving your meeting's purpose and desired outcomes. And along the way, frustrating your colleagues and wasting their time and yours. So, how does a meeting agenda avoid these problems?
Well, first of all, if you put your meeting agenda out in advance, it's going to help clarify the focus and the purpose of the meeting. By ordering the topics by importance, it also ensures you're covering the most important first. It allows participants to prep by letting them know what you're going to cover, and if they are expected to present or share at the meeting. Nobody likes to be caught by surprise. It also gives them a chance to make suggestions for additional items depending on the kind of meeting it is. And finally, it can help them decide whether they need to attend. Remember that clear acronym that we've talked about in the past. You want them to be in a position where they know whether they want to be there or not. And this helps that in addition to the meeting invite.
Indeed. Now, during the meeting, an agenda will help keep people focused on what you're covering. That's an obvious one. It's also a time management tool to help make sure you get through everything you've planned. And I like this one. It's an aid for you to rein people in when needed. Let's say someone is going down one of those rabbit holes. You can politely interrupt and get back on track by saying something like, "Hey, great point. Let me take a note, and then we better get back to our agenda."
Now finally, for after the meeting, I use the agenda again as my outline if it's the type of meeting where I need to send out notes. I know these days people like to send out recordings, but sometimes you want to have it written down and accessible to people in a shared note. It's also a way for you to evaluate your meeting effectiveness and whether you want to improve. Let's say you had 6 things on your meeting agenda and you got through 3. Maybe that's a lesson for you that next time you should just start with 3 and plan on having maybe an additional follow-up if necessary.
Indeed. All right, here's an example of an effective agenda. It includes the objective of the meeting, so everyone's on the same page regarding that desired outcome. If there was reading sent out in advance, it would be helpful to include that here too. It also includes a list of topics to cover, along with the person leading each topic and the time allocated for each. Now, little side note here, delegating topics is an effective way to help develop skills on your team. As an example, way back in my early career, I was a software developer, and my boss asked me to lead the portion of the staff meeting where we reviewed the outstanding bugs. The experience of tracking progress on tasks and holding people accountable for progress was my first taste of project management, and it helped me build some project management skills and enabled me to recognize my interest in moving my career in that direction. So, by thoughtfully delegating topics in your staff or project team meeting, you can help others build their capabilities and take something off your plate too.
Now, this is an example that we've turned into a meeting agenda template that you can find in the resources so that you can reuse it and turn it into your own. And finally, here are some examples of sample agendas just to help you with different kinds of meetings. This one is if you're leading a staff meeting, what types of topics you might have, including fun things like organizing a launch party, which we used to have back in the day in the software industry. This one is a team or a project meeting. You can see it has a desired outcome there, and it's got an agenda that supports the outcome of identifying cross-functional milestones and dependencies. Now, a decision or approval meeting, this is pretty rich right here, but this is how I do every single one of my meetings like this, where I start with options, criteria for the decision, top choices, discussion, and so on. And this is a good example of the kind of meeting where you probably have to have some really tight time management if you get into debates. And finally, here's an example of a problem-solving meeting. This too could take a long time and might end up resulting in multiple meetups. But again, I like starting with a recap that sometimes even requires agreement on what the problem is. Then you get into analysis of the cause of the problems and maybe your recommendations for solving the problem. So you can just use these as a starting point. We simplified them. Don't forget to put names against the topics, times against the topics, and make your agenda rich and understandable for people who are going to be using it as a tool for themselves as well.
And that's it. That is how to structure your agendas so they're the most effective and most successful. And don't forget, it's the most important tool for having effective meetings.
Really, it is.